My name is Eleanor Grace Mitchell, and I am 101 years old. I was a nurse, United States Army Nurse Corps, and on April 9th, 1942, I became a prisoner of the Imperial Japanese Army. I was 18 years old, and for the next 2 years and 10 months, I lived in a world that I still cannot fully describe. Not because I've forgotten, I remember everything, every single day. I can't describe it because the English language doesn't have words ugly enough for what happened to us. My children have asked me about it. My grandchildren have asked me about it. And I've always said the same thing. It was a long time ago. That's what I say. It was a long time ago. But that's a lie. It wasn't a long time ago. It was this morning. It was last night. It was 5 minutes ago. Because I dream about it. Every night. For 84 years, I have dreamed about that camp. And I wake up and I'm in my bedroom in Virginia, and I'm safe, and I'm 101 years old, and none of it matters, because for a few seconds, I'm still there. I'm still 18, and I can still smell it. But I've decided it's time, because the other girls, my girls, the ones I served with, they're almost all gone. Margaret died in 2011, Betty in 2017, Ruth in 2020, and I'm here. I'm the last one. And if I don't say what happened to us, nobody will. And we didn't survive that place just to be forgotten. Let me tell you how I got there. Because I wasn't supposed to be in the Philippines. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near a war. I grew up in a little town called Millbrook, Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains. My daddy was a tobacco farmer. My mama taught Sunday school at the Baptist church. We had a white house with a green porch and a vegetable garden out back, and 3 cats that my mama named after the apostles, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. She said she ran out of cats before she got to John. I was the youngest of 4, 3 older brothers, Thomas, William, and Henry. And being the youngest, being the only girl, they protected me. Lord, they protected me. I couldn't walk to school without one of them trailing behind me like a Secret Service agent, and I loved them for it. And I hated them for it, because I wasn't fragile. I was small, 5'2", 105 pounds, but I wasn't fragile. I was tough. My daddy said I was the toughest one in the family, and I think he was right. I wanted to be a nurse since I was 12. Our neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, she was a nurse during the First World War, and she'd tell me stories about France, about the field hospitals, about holding soldiers' hands while they died. And I thought, I know this sounds strange, but I thought that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Not the dying, the holding. The idea that you could be with someone in their worst moment and make it a little less terrible. That's what I wanted to do. I did my nursing training in Richmond, graduated in 1941, and in September of that year, I saw a notice that the Army Nurse Corps was recruiting for overseas assignments, the Philippines, and something in me said go. I can't explain it. Something just said go. My mama cried. My daddy drove me to the train station, and he held my face in his hands. I can still feel his rough hands on my cheeks. And he said, Eleanor, you take care of those boys over there, and you take care of yourself. And I said, yes, Daddy. I arrived in Manila in October 1941, and the Philippines, oh, it was beautiful. The most beautiful place I'd ever seen. The flowers, the trees, the ocean. I was stationed at Sternberg Hospital in Manila, and for 2 months it was almost like a vacation. The weather was warm, the people were kind, the work was steady but not hard. I wrote letters home telling my mama about the sunsets. And then December 8th happened. We heard about Pearl Harbor on the radio, and within hours, the Japanese were bombing Manila. I was on duty when the first bombs fell, and I will never forget the sound. It wasn't like thunder. It was like the earth was breaking apart. The windows in the hospital shattered. Patients were screaming. Nurses were screaming. And suddenly there was blood. Everywhere. Real blood. Not the kind you see in training. Real blood from real people who were dying right in front of me. And something happened to me in that moment. Something clicked. The fear went away. Not completely. The fear never goes completely away. But it moved to the back, and the nurse came to the front. And I worked. I worked for 36 hours straight that first day and night. Bandaging wounds, holding pressure on arteries, carrying men on stretchers who were twice my size. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just worked, because that's what you do. When people are dying in front of you, you don't have the luxury of falling apart. The Japanese advanced fast, faster than anyone expected. They pushed us out of Manila and onto the Bataan Peninsula, and that's where things got bad. The hospital moved into the jungle. We set up in the open air, under trees, with sheets hung between bamboo poles for walls, and the wounded kept coming, hundreds of them, thousands, men with legs blown off, men with burns over their entire bodies, men who were missing parts of their faces, and we had almost nothing. No proper bandages. We tore up sheets. No anesthesia. We held them down. No antibiotics. Infections spread like fire through dry grass. I watched men die every day, every single day. Young men, boys really, 19, 20, 21 years old. And they'd look at me. They'd look up at me from their cots with these eyes, these desperate, frightened eyes. And they'd say, "Am I going to be okay, nurse?" And I'd say, "You're going to be just fine, soldier." Even when I knew they weren't, even when I could see it. You lie. You lie because in that moment, the lie is the kindest thing you can give them. A few minutes of believing they're going to be okay, that's all you can give. And then they're gone, and you move to the next one. Bataan fell on April 9th, 1942, and everything changed. The Japanese came into the hospital area. Soldiers with bayonets and rifles and faces that showed nothing. No anger, no pity, nothing. They rounded us up, the nurses, the doctors, the patients who could walk, and they marched us out. And the patients who couldn't walk, I don't want to talk about what happened to the patients who couldn't walk. I'll just say that I heard sounds behind me as we marched away, and I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around, because if I turned around, I would have stopped, and if I stopped, they would have killed me. There were 67 of us, 67 Army nurses captured that day. The Angels of Bataan, they called us later. But we didn't feel like angels. We felt like animals, because that's how they treated us. They took us to Santo Tomas internment camp in Manila. It was a university, a real university with buildings and grounds that the Japanese had turned into a prison. And at first, it wasn't as bad as what came later. We were crowded, thousands of civilians and military personnel in a space meant for students. But we had buildings, we had roofs, we had some food, and we were allowed to continue nursing. They let us set up a clinic because the prisoners were getting sick, and the Japanese didn't want disease spreading to their own soldiers. But the food got less. Every month the food got less, and the rules got tighter, and the punishments got worse. They beat men for looking at a guard wrong. They beat women for not bowing fast enough. They put people in the sun, made them stand in the Philippine sun for hours without water as punishment. I saw a man die that way, just standing in the sun until his body gave out. He fell face first into the dirt, and nobody was allowed to touch him until the guard said so. And the guard didn't say so for a long time. I weighed 105 pounds when they captured me. A year later, I was 80. A year after that, I was under 70. My uniform hung off me like a sack. My arms were like sticks. My hip bones stuck out so far I couldn't sleep on my side. And I was a nurse. I was supposed to take care of people, and I could barely take care of myself. The diseases were the worst part. Malaria, dysentery, dengue fever, beriberi, scurvy. We had all of them at the same time. I had malaria 3 times. 3 times. The fever, the chills, the shaking so violent you think your bones are going to break. And there was no quinine, no medicine at all. You just lay there, and you either made it through or you didn't. And I made it through 3 times. I don't know why. Some people didn't make it through once. I nursed men and women and children who were dying, and I had nothing to give them. Nothing. No medicine, no food, no comfort except my hands and my voice. I would sit with them and hold their hand and say, "You're going to be all right." The same lie, the same beautiful, necessary lie. And they'd look at me, and some of them believed it, and some of them didn't. And then they'd die, and I'd close their eyes and pull the sheet over their face and move to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. There was a little girl, Filipino. Her name was Maria. She was maybe 6 years old. She'd been brought into the camp with her mother, and her mother died of dysentery in the first year. And this little girl, this tiny, beautiful little girl, she had nobody. So I took care of her. I shared my food with her. My ration, which was already not enough to keep me alive, I split with a 6-year-old. And the other nurses said, "Eleanor, you can't do that. You'll die." And I said, if I let her die, what am I surviving for? Maria lived. She survived the camp. And after the war, I tried to find her. For years, I tried to find her. I wrote letters. I contacted the Red Cross. I contacted the Philippine government. I never found her. I don't know what happened to Maria. And that, not knowing, that's one of the things I carry. One of the many things I carry. In 1944, they moved us. The Japanese were losing the war, and they were getting desperate. They moved us to Los Baños internment camp, south of Manila, and Los Baños was worse, much worse. The food was almost nothing, a cup of rice a day, sometimes less. We were eating weeds. We were eating bugs. I ate a grasshopper once. I caught it with my bare hands, and I ate it raw because my body was so desperate for protein that my hands moved before my mind could stop them. The guards at Los Baños were crueler than at Santo Tomás. They were younger, more fanatical. They believed in the emperor like he was God, and they hated us. You could feel the hatred coming off them like heat. One guard, I won't say his name because I don't want to say his name, he used to walk through the women's barracks at night with a flashlight, just walking, shining the light on us while we slept, not doing anything, just looking. And the fear of what he might do was worse than anything he actually did. That's what they understood about cruelty. The threat is the weapon. The waiting is the torture. We heard rumors that the Americans were coming, that MacArthur was coming back like he'd promised. But rumors in a prison camp are dangerous because hope is dangerous. Hope can keep you alive, but false hope can kill you. Because when the rescue doesn't come, the crash is harder than if you'd never hoped at all. But this time the rumors were true. February 23rd, 1945. I remember the date the way I remember my own birthday. It was early morning, just before dawn, and I heard a sound that I hadn't heard in almost 3 years. American engines, planes, and then paratroopers. American paratroopers dropping out of the sky into the camp. And at the same time, soldiers, army soldiers, real American soldiers, came crashing through the fences. There was gunfire. The Japanese guards were shooting. The Americans were shooting. And we were on the ground, flat on our bellies, with bullets flying over our heads. And I was praying. I was praying harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. God, don't let me die now. Not now. Not when they're here. Not when I'm this close. It was over in minutes. The Japanese guards were killed or captured. And then there were American soldiers standing in front of me, young boys. Clean uniforms, full faces. They looked like they'd just eaten breakfast. And they were looking at us, at these skeleton women in rags, and they were crying. These big, strong, armed soldiers were crying. And one of them, a boy who couldn't have been more than 19, he took off his jacket and he put it around my shoulders. And he said, "Ma'am, you're safe now." And I fell apart. Right there, I just fell apart. 3 years of holding it together. 3 years of being strong for everyone else. 3 years of not crying because if I started crying, I'd never stop. And it all came out. All of it. On a dirt road in the Philippines, wearing a soldier's jacket, weighing 63 pounds. They carried us out. Most of us couldn't walk. They put us on trucks and took us to a field hospital. And the doctors, the American doctors, they examined us, and I could see it on their faces, the shock, the horror, because we didn't look like women. We didn't look like people. We looked like something out of a nightmare. They fed us slowly, broth at first, then soft food, then real food. And my body had forgotten what real food was. I threw up the first 3 meals. My stomach had shrunk to the size of a walnut, but slowly, day by day, I started to come back. My body started to remember what it was supposed to be. I weighed 63 pounds when they liberated me. I want you to think about that. 63 pounds. I'm 5'2". I weighed 63 pounds. A 10-year-old weighs more than that. I was a skeleton with skin. My hair was falling out in clumps. My teeth were loose. My eyes were sunken so deep into my skull that the doctors said I looked like I'd aged 40 years. I was 21 years old, and I looked 60. They put us on a ship home, and I stood on the deck, and I watched the Philippines disappear, and I said goodbye to the girls who didn't make it. I said their names out loud, every one of them, into the wind, so the ocean would carry their names home, even if their bodies never made it. They flew us to Hawaii first, Tripler Hospital. And I remember walking into that hospital, being carried into that hospital, and seeing myself in a mirror for the first time in almost 3 years. And I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She was old. She had gray in her hair at 21 years old. Her cheekbones were so sharp they looked like they'd cut through her skin. Her eyes were too big for her face because her face had shrunk around them. And I stood there. I held onto the wall because I couldn't stand on my own. And I stared at that woman and I thought, that's not me. That can't be me. I'm 18. I'm Eleanor from Millbrook. I have brown hair and round cheeks, and I weigh 105 pounds. But that woman in the mirror, she was something else, something the war had made. And I turned away because I couldn't look at her anymore. They kept us in Hawaii for 3 weeks, feeding us slowly, carefully, like you feed a baby bird that fell out of its nest. And the nurses there, the American nurses who were taking care of us, they were so kind. But I could see it in their eyes, the pity. And I didn't want pity. I wanted someone to look at me like I was normal, like I was just a woman, not a skeleton, not a victim, just Eleanor. But nobody looked at me that way, not for a long time. I came home to Millbrook in May 1945, and my mama was on the porch. And she, my mama, who was the strongest woman I ever knew, she saw me and her knees buckled. My brother Thomas had to catch her, because the last time she'd seen me, I was a healthy 18-year-old girl, and now I was what I was. And she held me on that porch and she rocked me like a baby and she said, "My girl, my sweet girl, what did they do to you?" And I said, "I'm home, Mama, I'm home," because that's all I could say. My daddy couldn't look at me for 2 days, not because he didn't love me, because he couldn't bear it. His little girl, the one he'd held in his hands when she was born. He couldn't look at what they'd done to me. And on the 3rd day, he came into my room and he sat on the edge of my bed and he took my hand and he said, "I should never have let you go." And I said, "Daddy, I had to go." And he nodded, and we never talked about it again. I tried to go back to nursing. I did go back. I worked at a hospital in Richmond for 12 years. Thomas died in 2001, and after he was gone, the nightmares got worse because he wasn't there to make the tea. He wasn't there in the kitchen with the light on, and I'd wake up in that dark house, and for a moment, just a moment, I'd think I was back in the barracks, back in Los Baños, and I'd have to touch the sheets, feel the cotton, feel the pillow, to remind myself where I was. People call me a hero, and I don't like that word. I wasn't a hero. The heroes are the ones who didn't come home. The heroes are the nurses who died of malaria and dysentery in those camps. The heroes are the patients I couldn't save. The boy whose hand I held while he died on a cot made of bamboo in a jungle in the Philippines. He's the hero, not me. I just survived. That's not heroism. That's stubbornness. I'm 101 years old, the last one. The last of the 67 nurses captured on Bataan. They're all gone now. Margaret, Betty, Ruth, Helen, Dorothy, Frances, all of them. And I'm here, sitting in this chair, 101 years old, with bad knees and bad eyes, and a heart that keeps beating, even though sometimes I wish it would just let me rest. But before I rest, I need to say this. I need to say it for the girls who can't say it anymore. We were there. We were in that war. We suffered. We starved. We were beaten and humiliated and stripped of everything that makes a person. And we survived. Not because we were special, not because we were brave, because we had each other. Because at night, in the dark, in those barracks, we held each other's hands, and we whispered, one more day, just one more day, and one more day became 2, and 2 became 100, and 100 became 1,000, and 1,000 became 84 years. My name is Eleanor Grace Mitchell. I am 101 years old. I was a prisoner of war, and I am the last one. Don't forget us. Please, don't forget my girls.